Alright, so the sequel of the 2015 post-apocalyptic game Dying Light is said to come soon, and considering that it has been one of my favorite games out there, I decided I'd step back into it and make a video classifying all the infected variants you'll be opposing in this game. So the Harran virus that exists in-game is a variation of the Alyssa virus that affects the mind and nervous system, converting you into a man-eating monster that strives for the extinction of all life on Earth. We do know that this fictional virus was man-made and was either accidentally or purposely released to the public of Harran by the Ministry. The virus is obviously much more efficient than rabies as it spread throughout the city, infecting the vast majority of the population. But luckily, the government was able to keep it dormant within the borders of Harran. But that doesn't leave the fact that humans still live amongst the rotting city, and it should be obvious that these survivors are constantly in danger and live with these infected, fighting to hold on to what makes them human. In-game, you are one of these fighters. Now, the most common infected you'll run into is the biter. Biters usually appear in hordes and are the undead and decaying stage of the infection. Though they are the most common, they fortunately have been decaying for so long that most of their human physical capabilities have rotted away. They're weak, dumb, and best of all, slow. But the interesting thing about biters in this game is that they're all different when it comes to physical strength and danger. Some biters are faster, tougher, some are more docile than others, some have missing limbs, and some even leak this toxin out of their body that poisons you if you take a hit. There are also some biters that are completely in flames, increasing their damage, and are unaffected by flame weaponry. Some biters even kept a small bit of their former humanity and use weapons to kill you, though it's pretty obvious that they don't really know how to use them, since most of the time they just swing them around mindlessly. A biter's age is usually determined by their strength. For the older and more decayed a biter is, the weaker. It's best to aim for the head when face to face with a biter, and use many power techniques like grapple or tackle. There's also a biter that is equipped with a hazmat suit, disabling their ability to grab and bite you. These hazmat zombies also have a gas tank mounted on their back that you can pierce, causing it to explode. That could actually be useful in killing other infected. One more thing about the hazmats is that you will very rarely run into a hazmat that is already leaking propane from its tank, and will detonate very soon. In reaction to this, the biter and the hazmat will bolt directly towards the nearest player in hopes of eliminating the player along with him. Occasionally, you'll encounter the second most common type of infected that's a lot more dangerous than most of the infected on this list: the viral. A viral is a freshly turned zombie and still has all the physical capabilities of a human being, including dodging, running, parkour, feeling pain, using strategy, and interestingly, on occasion, begging for mercy after being struck before reverting back to their viral state. No! Please, no! Virals are also seen using cooperative strategy to best their enemies. When in a horde of biters, virals will wait until you're surrounded and overwhelmed by them, then attack, following up with a withdrawal, again repeating the process. Sometimes when you are face to face with a viral, they won't even charge you, and instead wait for you to strike first so they can counterattack, often succeeding. Avoid firing guns or detonating explosives, for causing loud noises is the most common way to encounter a viral. They've got good ears, and will immediately react to any abrupt sound by traversing across the entire fucking city to identify what the hell those convenient gunshots were. I also recommend to use quick and light weapons when dealing with them. Heavy two-handed weapons are a lot easier to evade, and a viral will do so no problem. If your goal is to retreat, well, then doing so will be difficult since virals run at your exact same pace and have the ability to climb and parkour like you, although it's still possible to outsmart them and break sight of them. There's actually a common type of mutated biter that stands much larger than the average person and carries around a rebar with random concrete and debris attached to it. This is known as the goon. The goon is a large, burly biter, often wearing an industrial uniform that provides some protection, so it's best to aim for the unprotected head unless it has headwear. The goon is actually the first mutant we were introduced to in the campaign, and we eventually run into stronger and stronger goons as we advance through the story. Fighting a goon alone is relatively easy, as it's a simple, repetitive process of striking then backing up, evading a slow rebar swing, following up with more striking then backing up, as goons are very slow. Fighting goons is a pretty good way to level up your agility though, because the amount of dodging that you have to do would put a professional track and field athlete in the hospital for overexertion. You could actually use the goon to kill other infected if you wanted to. They don't really care for other biters and will often swing without second thoughts when a biter is in the way. Sometimes when fighting a goon near a propane tank or gas barrel, they will accidentally rupture the tanks, causing an immediate explosion. Try to avoid this because you could very easily kill yourself along with it, attracting the entire regime of virals. It also doesn't really affect the goon nearly as much as it affects you. One more interesting thing about the goons is that flashing lights at them actually annoys them for some reason, and they will shield their eyes and groan in a whiny tone when their eyes are exposed to a flashlight. The weakest infected you'll probably ever run into is the toad. The toad is an agile mutant with an overgrown belly that he uses to launch projectile stomach acid directly at you. This acid can be extremely devastating if executed correctly. The toad is often spotted near wet areas like lakes and beach sides, or near toxic waste, which probably explains their mutation. Toads are a lot more agile than most biters, and they have been seen leaping from roof to roof, either to retreat or obtain a better position for firing range. Toads are most commonly seen among hordes of biters or other mutant variants, as they are at their best when working together with other infected. When approaching a toad, note that a toad will vomit weaker, shorter range acidic phlegm the closer you get in attempts to ward you off. Usually the best way to deal with toads unscathed is with range weapons. Toads are very weak, and a few hits with a pipe or sharp object is enough to knock them down, including throwing weapons. Kind of like the suicider hazmat I mentioned about earlier, there's a grotesque type of infected that specifically aims to kill itself alongside you. These are called the bombers. Though bombers seem pretty simple when it comes to their purpose, there's a lot more to them that adds onto how dangerous they are. When dealing with bombers, always, no matter what, use range attacks. Melee weapons of such will 100% lead to a fatal outcome, as bombers will immediately explode when receiving the slightest bit of damage. When a bomber catches sight of you, they will begin shuffling towards you until you are within range. Once they think they are in an acceptable vicinity of the player, they will begin a detonation process where they retract their bloated and exposed organs and muscles, building up all the gas in their body to explode on command, completely covering you in their bodily fluids and blood, most likely infecting you in the process. If you do somehow survive the explosion, you will soon realize that there is another use for bombers other than bombing: an alarm. A bomber's explosion is so loud that it is expected that at least 3 or 4 virals will show up, at least. The bomber not only helps the infected with clearing out runners and infecting some in the process of their explosion, but they also work very well as dinner bells for virals. Something that you should always be careful about at night or in a dark building is to think about where you shine your flashlight. A flashlight will instantly put a bomber into its process before exploding. Even if the bomber doesn't notice the player, it will react to any type of immediate electrical light shined upon them with detonation. Most of the infected we see in game are adults, but there are actually infected children in the game that act a lot differently from the common biter. These are classified as screamers, and as the name implies, a screamer will completely go apeshit when catching sight of you and will scream so ear-piercing loud that not only does it attract many virals and other infected, it also shreds your eardrums, causing devastating damage to the player.
Is that a child crying?
To deal with screamers, simply bolt directly towards them once noticed, then hit the interact button to calm them down. You have to make this as quick as possible, because just the slightest noise the screamer produces will be enough to attract every type of infected around you directly to your area. Or you could just shoot them, or throw something at them so they don't even scream in the first place. Something interesting about the screamers is that they strangely have an almost identical appearance to the Volatiles, with their pale skin and grotesque red growths, which was why I was debating with myself whether I should classify them as a night mutation or day mutation, but we'll talk about that later. The largest type of infected and the first official boss we encounter in game is the Demolisher. Now the Demolisher is interesting, I'd say. The variant itself not only has extremely abnormal properties, but it's also classified as a failed mutation. Its viral development went so far to bullshit that it became this shredded upper body behemoth that simply wants to brutally fold you in half instead of infect you. You first encounter this brawler in Rise's personal gladiatorial arena known as the Pit. After that, they mostly naturally spawn in Old Town, brawling with 2 to 3 other survivors. It uses its man-sized arms to throw at you, sending you flying if a direct hit from one of these trucker limbs is taken. But if you are distant enough, the Demolisher will tuck in his arms and charge you with his shoulder, sprinting at a reasonably quick pace. That's right, this thing can fucking run. Though intimidating, this attack can easily be avoided and actually makes it easier to kill him, as he tends to run into structures and spiked walls, dazing him so you can land a few hits. But be careful, because this guy doesn't give you any signs of recovery, and when he thinks he's regathered his strength, you won't wait any longer to swing, launching you into the stratosphere. You might think that getting to a higher platform where he can't reach you is a good idea, since he's incapable of everything. But you'd be surprised. Though most of his attacks are sloppy and poorly executed, he still has somewhat a mind of his own, and uses his surroundings to his advantage. So when you're beyond his reach on a rooftop, he will effortlessly plow an entire chunk of cement out of the ground and launch it like a discus along with the entire might of the Harran virus with it. Sometimes he won't even throw cement. He'll locate the nearest broken down car and flip the entire automobile across the map and attempt to crush you. Remember that the Demolisher usually has a layer of armor protecting itself, including a helmet, so before you can do any real damage to it, you have to break those off first. Something I find funny but at the same time weird about the Demolisher is that he has a habit of flexing his rotting mutated muscles at you, taunting your puny existence. This is pretty strange considering it's basically an overgrown biter, so why does it still hold the intelligence to show dominance? Other than that, that's basically it for all the daylight infected, as I will be continuing this topic in another video covering the horrors that appear at night.